Hi, it's Paige from Giggly Squad, and this episode is sponsored by Experian Boost. Summer glow up? Check. Credit glow up? Even better. Boost your credit scores instantly by getting credit for bills you're already paying. Your phone, utilities, rent, and insurance. I wish dating kind of worked like that. Connect your bank account, add those on-time payments to your Experian credit file, and your FICO score updates right away. You could instantly raise your FICO score by an average of 14 points with Experian Boost. Download the Experian app for free today. Results will vary. Users who received a boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. See App Store or Experian.com for details.
Results will vary. Not all payments are Boost eligible. Users who received a Boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. Some may not see improved scores or approval odds. Not all lenders use Experian credit files. And not all lenders use scores impacted by Experian Boost. See Experian.com for details.
Here's a tip for you. There's a podcast out there with fans waiting to be your next customer. They tune in every week, they trust the host, and that host wants to talk about brands like yours in their own words to their audience. The problem is, you just haven't been introduced yet. We're Acast, where that introduction happens. As the world's largest podcast marketplace, we let you browse shows, see who's listening, and book host-read sponsorships or run your own ads, all from one platform. Transparent pricing, real-time data, complete control. Start advertising on podcasts by visiting acast.com/advertise.
Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Scary. If you're new here, my name is Will, and each week I narrate your real life paranormal experiences as well as cover some famous paranormal cases along the way. And if you have your own paranormal experience that you would like me to narrate on the show, you can send it to scaryaparanormalpodcast at gmail.com and it just might get made into a future episode. Before we get into this week's paranormal experience, I would like to say a special thank you to our new Patreon subscribers who are Priscilla, Taylor Walker, Christina Harmer, Stefani Highfield, and Jenny Catt. Thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon, and if this is something that you are interested in, you can find the link in this episode's show notes or simply go to patreon.com/scaryaparanormalpodcast. Over there you can gain access to exclusive scary episodes as well as ad-free main episodes. But now, let's get into our next paranormal encounter. Ever since I was little, I've always been able to sense things, whether that be energy from a person or a place, or I'd get a feeling that there was something or someone there that I couldn't necessarily see, but I knew they were just out of view. My parents were military, so I grew up moving around very frequently and living in military quarters. My mum and I have always said that some of the houses we lived in carried different energies, some good, some not so good. I never saw anything specifically that I can remember in the army quarters. However, there were many incidences where members of my family had. The worst house we got posted to was our very last one before my mum decided to leave the military. I must have been around 9 or 10, and my brother was around 2 or 3. My brother has absolutely zero memory of ever living in this house, despite him being able to remember the house we lived in before and after. This particular house had a very dark feel about it. very oppressive energy that actually stopped me from taking the big bedroom at the side of the house. I actually slept there for one night when we first moved in, and all I could feel in that room was as if somebody was watching me from the wardrobe area in the corner. It was a very basic built-in wardrobe that was off in a little offshoot to the side of the room, and I remember lying in the bed and not wanting to look at that side of the room. I just had this really strong feeling that I knew I would see somebody standing there. I then moved into the tiny box room next to my brother's room, and the big room became the guest room. The only other time that I slept in that room was for a sleepover that I had with a friend that lived in another military house down the road from ours. They ended up having a panic attack at 3 a.m. and my dad had to walk them back home. I thought that they might have just been homesick, but when my dad had explained what had happened on the phone to her parents, they were very confused and said that she had never had an issue sleeping around at friends' houses before. It was very odd to me that it happened in that room. My grandma frequently came and stayed with us to help with childcare for my little brother. She will always say how much she hated sleeping in that room when she stayed. There was one occasion where she was sat in the living room in the middle of the day, and my brother, dad and I had gone out for a dog walk. In that house, when you sat on the sofa, you had a view of the staircase. She said that as she was sitting on the sofa, she swears to this day, that she saw a man walk past the doorway to the living room and up the stairs. She described him as being very tall, he had broad shoulders, and he was wearing military combats. She said she was very confused but assumed that it was one of my mum's colleagues that had come over to see us. This was not too uncommon on military camps. Everyone knew everyone else. Often houses needed to have maintenance done and people would turn up unannounced. So she got up to follow this man and see if he was okay. And she shouted up the stairs, "Hello?" And a male voice replied very clearly with a cheery, "Hello?" So she went upstairs to see if she could see where he was gone, and she searched the whole house and she couldn't find anyone. At this point, she started to feel very uneasy and remembers going to stand in the front garden by the gate to wait for my dad and us to come back. Luckily, it wasn't long before we did, and I remember my grandma standing at the front gate looking absolutely terrified. My immediate thought was that something really bad had happened. She explained quietly to Dad what had happened, and Dad went in the house to search for the man while we all stayed outside with Grandma. He found absolutely nothing. It was at this point that my little brother then said, "Is it the man in the wardrobe?" He was only 3 at the time, and my grandma and dad were very shocked that he had understood what was going on and had actually suggested the only place in the house my dad hadn't looked, the wardrobe in the spare room. He actually went and checked again, but he didn't find anything. Afterwards, he asked my little brother why he had said what he said, and my little brother simply replied, "That's where he lives, the man in Grandma's room." Luckily, my parents had actually bought their own house in a nearby village and were in the process of renovating it, so we didn't have to stay in that house for too much longer. I hadn't actually experienced anything paranormal firsthand until my early 20s. It was a really odd time for me. My parents had actually split up and gotten back together, and as a result, my dad's house from the split was vacant. I was now with my ex-partner at the time, and we were very kindly allowed to move in and rent it off my dad whilst he and my mum worked things out. This house also felt very off to me ever since my dad had bought it. It was a few streets away from my college. I remember going back there for lunch and then not even wanting to sit in the house alone during the day. The stairs for me were the worst part. They came down into the living room as they do in most old, small semi-houses. The sofa had its back to the stairs, and every time you sat there you felt like something was watching you from the top of the stairs. I used to get nightmares about a horrible crouching figure, pretty much like the ones you would typically see in a horror film. And in my dreams it would be sitting at the top of the stairs looking through the banisters at me. When I moved into this house with my ex, I was, like I said, in my early 20s, and I had conveniently forgotten all of those teenage feelings in the excitement of living together for the first time in our own space. For the first few months, there was nothing strange happening. One day, when I came home from work, I found that our oven door had completely shattered. It looked like someone had put their foot through it. We hadn't left it on. It hadn't cooled down rapidly and shattered. There was, in my opinion, no possible explanation for why it had happened. I was kind of shaken up by this. I had this really bad feeling, almost like there was an aggression behind it, but my partner didn't feel the same. The next thing that happened was in the kitchen again. We started getting dried mud in the kitchen, which led from the back door all the way through to the bottom of the stairs. It looked like dried mud had fallen out of the tread of work boots. I initially blamed my partner, who wore heavy sight boots for work. We knew that it definitely wasn't one of us when one day I had hoovered before leaving the house, and as soon as we both walked back in, we saw the dried mud. We ended up buying an inside security camera that could hook up to your phone. At this point, I think we were pretty much convinced that we had an actual intruder. I then started getting notifications all the time when I was at work that the camera, which was in the kitchen focused on the back door, had been triggered, but there was never anything there. We must have repositioned it, lowered the sensitivity, and fiddled about with this camera about 100 times before giving up and just accepting that it must be the light or a plant in the garden moving in the wind that was triggering it through a window. We didn't have any mud for weeks and weeks after we got the camera, until one day I came home to find it pretty much everywhere throughout the house. On the stairs, in our bedroom. I checked the camera, and there had been nothing captured all day. It was at this point that we were becoming very uneasy living in this house, and we decided to change the locks on both the front and the back door and install a doorbell camera too. It's also worth noting that our neighbours who shared a wall with us were an elderly couple who were so kind, but unfortunately the wife had a very aggressive form of dementia. It got so bad that towards the end she would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and start banging on the walls. This was something we became very used to. At around the same time as the mud had started appearing, this lady had very sadly been taken into a home, which meant that our husband was left on his own in the house. One night after she had been gone for weeks, I woke up to the sound of banging on the walls, and it took me a second to realise that it wasn't coming from the shared wall, but from the wall behind our bed. And this wall was shared with a bathroom at the top of our stairs. I remember quickly waking up my partner, and we both sat there listening to what sounded like someone trapped in the bathroom and banging on the walls. My partner got up to check, and they found the bathroom empty, and we both checked the rest of the house and didn't find anything. We were both becoming increasingly more anxious when we spent any time in the house, and especially when we were on our own. Even sleeping at night in the house was becoming more and more difficult, whether we were alone or together. The worst thing happened shortly after this incident in the bathroom. It was a weekday evening, and my partner and I had settled down to watch something in the living room on the sofa. At some point I needed to use the bathroom, so I went upstairs, and when I was coming out of the bathroom to go down the stairs, I felt this overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me from somewhere. I remember leaving the bathroom and turning to go down the stairs. I remember being at the top of the stairs and pausing for a second before I took a step down. I had this overwhelming, weird feeling that someone was watching me. So I try shake this feeling off, and I go to walk down the stairs, and just as I do, I felt as though someone had kicked me in the back of my knees, and I buckled forward. The force of the impact sent me flying down the stairs at such a speed I only managed to grab the bottom of the banister and swing myself around before hitting the floor. If I hadn't have done this, I would have been seriously injured. My partner had seen me fly down the stairs out of the corner of their eye, and they jumped up and actually shouted out of shock and ran over, thinking I had seriously injured myself. I just remember lying on the floor and being really afraid to move because I thought I had injured myself. Luckily, I was absolutely fine, just very shaken. And I immediately started crying, saying that somebody had pushed me down the stairs. I was adamant that there was someone in the house and somebody had pushed me. There was nothing that you could say that would calm me down. I was convinced of this. I made them check every single nook and cranny of the house and the attic. There was no one there. When all these things were happening, I decided to tell my mum everything that was currently happening and how I'd been feeling. I was convinced that there was something in that house that wanted to harm me. And instead of brushing me off, she suggested that we both go there in the middle of the day and sit down to talk to it. This was really shocking to me. My mum was always a very practical person, and I was not expecting her to treat a potential ghost or entity with the same pragmatic problem-solving approach that she always did. She even ordered some sage to burn in the house, And a few days later, when my partner was out of the house, we opened all the doors and windows and we walked around the house burning sage and repeating, "You are not welcome here." This, in hindsight, was probably not a good idea, as we had absolutely no idea how to deal with anything like this, and if something were to happen, I don't know what we would have done. I'm a little surprised to this day that we didn't anger whatever was there. The house did feel calmer after, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. We ended up staying there for a short while after, and eventually my dad decided to sell it. I do walk past it every now and then, and I still get that dark feeling. Nothing like this has happened to me since, and I've moved house at least 3 times since. It might just be a military child thing, but there are definitely good houses and bad houses. Thank you to Emma for sending in her paranormal experience. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss any future episodes of Scary. The links for everything you need can be found in the episode show notes. Thank you for listening, and join me next time for another episode of Scary.
Hi, it's Paige from Giggly Squad, and this episode is sponsored by Experian Boost. Summer glow up? Check. Credit glow up? Even better. Boost your credit scores instantly by getting credit for bills you're already paying. Your phone, utilities, rent, and insurance. I wish dating kind of worked like that. Connect your bank account, add those on-time payments to your Experian credit file, and your FICO score updates right away. You could instantly raise your FICO score by an average of 14 points with Experian Boost. Download the Experian app for free today. Results will vary. Users who received a boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. See App Store or Experian.com for details.
Results will vary. Not all payments are Boost eligible. Users who received a Boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. Some may not see improved scores or approval odds. Not all lenders use Experian credit files, and not all lenders use scores impacted by Experian Boost. See Experian.com for details.
We see you, the one behind the camera, making sure the moments that matter get remembered. Shutterfly turns your memories into something that lasts, like photo books that tell your travel stories, photo blankets that feature your favorite cuddle buddies, or a canvas print that brings you back to the moment you said, "I do." Big moments or everyday ones, Shutterfly makes it easy to keep them close.
Make something that means something. Shutterfly.
Here's a tip for you. There's a podcast out there with fans waiting to be your next customer. They tune in every week, they trust the host, and that host wants to talk about brands like yours in their own words to their audience. The problem is, you just haven't been introduced yet. We're Acast, where that introduction happens. As the world's largest podcast marketplace, we let you browse shows, see who's listening, and book host-read sponsorships or run your own ads, all from one platform. Transparent pricing, real-time data, complete control. Start advertising on podcasts by visiting acast.com/advertise.
We see you, the one behind the camera, making sure the moments that matter get remembered. Shutterfly turns your memories into something that lasts, like photo books that tell your travel stories, photo blankets that feature your favorite cuddle buddies, or a canvas print that brings you back to the moment you said, "I do." Big moments or everyday ones, Shutterfly makes it easy to keep them close.
Make something that means something. Shutterfly.
Hi, it's Paige from Giggly Squad, and this episode is sponsored by Experian Boost. Summer glow up? Check. Credit glow up? Even better. Boost your credit scores instantly by getting credit for bills you're already paying. Your phone, utilities, rent, and insurance. I wish dating kind of worked like that. Connect your bank account, add those on-time payments to your Experian credit file, and your FICO score updates right away. You could instantly raise your FICO score by an average of 14 points with Experian Boost. Download the Experian app for free today. Results will vary. Users who received a boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. See App Store or Experian.com for details.
Results will vary. Not all payments are boost eligible. Users who received a boost improved their FICO score 8 from Experian by an average of 14 points. Some may not see improved scores or approval odds. Not all lenders use Experian credit files. And not all lenders use scores impacted by Experian Boost. See Experian.com for details.
While every other channel is fighting for your customers' attention, podcasts are where they've already given it. No one accidentally listens to a podcast for 45 minutes. They choose to be here. They trust the voice in their ears, and when that voice talks about your brand, it doesn't sound like advertising. It sounds like a recommendation from a friend. Acast gives you that trust at scale. Digital precision, host-read authenticity, and performance data that proves it worked. Don't fight for attention. Buy it with Acast. Learn more by visiting acast.com/advertise.